Hi, and welcome to Creepy Crime Story, where the darkest truths aren't imagined. They're real. February 8th, 2025. Seward, Nebraska. A town so quiet it almost forgets to echo. The sidewalks were crusted with a thin layer of sleet, sun just cracking the edge of the horizon when a call came through to the Seward County Dispatch. A woman from North 5th Street reported something odd. Her neighbor's porch light had been left on all night. The car still parked in the driveway since the day before, and now the back door looked slightly open. Nothing overtly dramatic, just off. Enough to make her uneasy. Dispatch coded it for a welfare check. No immediate concern. No lights and sirens urgency. Deputy Alec McCready was first on scene. He knocked. No response. Walked the perimeter. The snow by the back porch was disturbed, one small patch flattened beneath a heavy step. The door gave way without resistance. It hadn't been kicked in, hadn't even been forced. It had been opened, with a key or a quiet hand. Inside, the temperature was average. No sound, no motion. He stepped into the living room. That's where he saw her. Jamie Hagan, 36, was lying prone on the laminate floor. Blood had dried in sharp contrast against the blonde wood. The pool, dark and static, coagulated. Her right arm was tucked underneath her chest, left arm curled beside her, a position not fallen into but collapsed. Nearby, 4 shell casings, .40 caliber. Grouped close together, tight, practice shots. No overturned furniture, no defensive wounds later found, no call made, no struggle recorded. Death had been swift. Her phone sat on the kitchen island, screen still unlocked but dim. Later forensic recovery would show her last text was sent at 11:34 p.m. the night before. It read, "He's out. If anything happens, tell the girls I love them." That was it. No punctuation. Just a final, quietly panicked declaration. She didn't call 911. She didn't run. She didn't even leave the house. Jamie Hagan was a mother, divorced with 2 daughters, ages 9 and 12, who by some grace of fate were staying with their grandparents that night. She worked a clerical position at a local insurance agency. No criminal record, no known substance abuse. Her colleagues called her reliable, quiet, guarded. She kept things to herself. But some knew there had been someone in her life, a relationship that had turned volatile in the fall of 2024. A name had come up in whispers. A protective order had been filed 2 months before. When crime scene techs arrived, they found little more than what Deputy McCready had already observed. No forced entry, no evidence of ransacking, no signs of Jamie attempting to flee. The house was clean. The windows were locked from the inside. The only irregularity, the security system had been disconnected 3 weeks earlier. There was no footage from her own cameras. However, one of the neighbors had a Ring doorbell camera that captured a single figure, tall, wide-shouldered, walking toward Jamie's home at 12:47 a.m. The image was partially obscured, the hedges blurring the frame, but the silhouette was clear enough. No footage of that figure leaving the property ever appeared. Analysis of Jamie's phone showed that it stopped transmitting data at 12:51 a.m., likely powered off or disabled. The Wi-Fi disconnected at 12:52. By 1:10 a.m., the house had gone dark entirely. The trajectory of the rounds indicated they were fired from behind, just slightly to the left. 2 shots struck her torso, one through the left side of her neck. The final bullet lodged in the left side of her skull. Contact wound. No hesitation marks, no warning. Execution style. Inside the dishwasher, 6 dishes were stacked neatly. In the sink, a rinsed mug. On the table, a backpack half unzipped. One daughter's science fair poster rolled beside it. The front door was locked. The back, as noted, had been opened just wide enough to chill the edge of the kitchen. No weapon was found in the house. No prints besides those of Jamie and her family. No unknown hairs or fibers in plain view. And yet it was unmistakably a homicide. Clean, cold, controlled. Lead investigator Detective Mara Ellison reviewed the initial findings with the quiet tension of someone who'd seen enough violence to stop believing in accidents. The protective order from December was noted. So were 2 prior police reports. A previous violation had been filed just 3 weeks earlier, when the suspect allegedly parked outside Jamie's office and refused to leave. There had been no arrest at that time. Ellison said later in an interview, "Everything was too aligned. The entry, the time of death, the power cut. It wasn't an impulsive act. This was follow-through." Bloodstain pattern analysis showed minimal splatter, again supporting the theory of close-range deliberate shooting. No gunshot residue was found on Jamie's hands, ruling out the possibility of a struggle over a firearm. She never had a chance. Autopsy results, released 48 hours later, confirmed what the scene had already made plain. Jamie Hagan died between 12:55 and 1:10 a.m., February 8, 2025. Cause of death, penetrating gunshot wound to the head. Manner of death, homicide. In towns like Seward, murder doesn't just take a life, it reshapes every inch of silence around it. Every neighbor who'd left their porch light on, every parent who tucked their kids into bed believing tomorrow would be normal. Jamie Hagan's death wasn't just a private tragedy, it was a public failing. She had filed the paperwork. She had told people she was scared. She had sent the text. And still, she died. February 9th, 2025. Less than 36 hours after the body of Jamie Hagan was discovered, investigators shifted focus to establishing a digital and physical timeline that could narrow the window of opportunity and identify who had the means and access to carry out the attack. With no forced entry and no sign of struggle, the likelihood that the killer was someone familiar with the victim and her routines became a working assumption. Jamie's phone was submitted to digital forensics. Although the device had powered down shortly after midnight on February 8th, the internal logs provided more than enough metadata for reconstruction. The last message she sent, flagged at 11:34 p.m., had already been reviewed by the initial response team, but forensic analysts recovered a secondary set of location pings from 11:36 p.m. to 12:51 a.m. that showed the phone remained static inside the residence. No outgoing calls, no app activity, no movement. Then at 12:52 a.m., the device disconnected from Wi-Fi and ceased transmitting location data. The battery had not died. It had been shut off. Data logs from the home's smart thermostat, synced via Jamie's cloud account, showed an abrupt shift at exactly 1:10 a.m. when the heating system dropped into away mode. This setting only activated when all mobile-linked users had left the premises or their devices went offline. Detectives cross-checked this with the router logs. The connection dropped fully, not degraded, indicating either a manual power cut or deliberate router disconnection. Jamie hadn't left. The system believed she had. From the digital trail alone, the event timeline became clearer. 11:34 p.m. Last text sent by Jamie, 12:47 a.m. Unknown figure captured on neighbor's ring. Camera approaching Jamie's home, 12:51 a.m. Jamie's phone goes offline, 12:52 a.m. Wi-Fi connection ends, 1:10 a.m. Thermostat activates away mode that left a precise window of approximately 20 minutes, narrow but not impossible, in which the homicide occurred. The operation was clean and quick. It was also specific. Whoever entered that home knew exactly where Jamie would be, where the cameras were placed, and how to silence any remaining electronic trace. Detective Mara Ellison had the digital forensics team expand the scope. Router traffic analysis showed 2 connected devices in the house on the evening of February 7th. Jamie's iPhone and her laptop. The laptop had not been used after 10:02 p.m. The final saved document, a health insurance form partially filled out for one of her daughters. No suspicious downloads, no encrypted messages, no outbound access to cloud storage after that time. Ellison then authorized examination of network penetration logs. There was no evidence of remote access. The intrusion had been physical, not digital. Jamie hadn't been targeted by someone hacking in. This was someone who knew her, someone who could stand inside that house without hesitation. In parallel, a full audit of Jamie's known contacts was initiated. Investigators compiled a list of past and recent associations, co-workers, family members, known acquaintances, and former romantic partners. One name had already appeared in court records, attached to a protective order Jamie filed in December 2024. That individual was flagged for background review, but formal identification as a suspect had not been made, not yet. Meanwhile, crime scene technicians returned to the property to reassess entry and egress routes. While the snow around the back door had mostly melted due to sunlight exposure, trace elements of particulate matter, pine bark mulch, and dark clay were recovered along the baseboard threshold. Soil composition tests would later show the combination was consistent with landscaping found near a separate property on 9th Street. That information alone wasn't actionable. Many yards in Seward share similar material, but it narrowed options for footprint comparison. A secondary check of the perimeter fence revealed abrasion marks approximately 42 inches from the ground on the east-facing panel. Splintering along the top suggested recent pressure, consistent with someone scaling over it. The angle and location indicated an exit path, not entry. This raised a new question. If the killer left through the fence, but there was no video capturing that exit, what route had they taken? And what had they done with the murder weapon? No gun was located at the scene. No residue was found on Jamie. No shell casings outside the body count. The shooter had retrieved everything they brought in and vanished. That kind of control didn't match an impulsive outburst. It matched a plan. A brief but significant development came late that afternoon when the Ring camera data was reanalyzed. Originally thought to capture a figure at 12:47 a.m., the refined timestamp, following server clock correction, revealed the approach occurred at 12:39 a.m. That adjustment moved the presumed moment of attack earlier by 8 minutes. Not a major shift on paper, but enough to tighten the chain of events. Ellison noted in her case report, the data aligned too cleanly. Sometimes that's the problem. You don't plan a murder this precise unless you've rehearsed it mentally at least a dozen times. Interviews with neighbors offered limited insight. No one reported hearing gunfire, unsurprising given the use of a .40 caliber pistol, likely fitted with a suppressor. One resident on the next block reported seeing a dark vehicle idling near the intersection of 5th and Walnut just after 1 a.m. He assumed it was a rideshare or a delivery driver. No license plate, no identifying decals. With the digital and physical timelines now synchronized, investigators shifted attention toward vehicle traffic and surveillance footage from the surrounding area. A request for business security camera records within a 2-mile radius was issued by noon on February 10th. They were looking for a vehicle that didn't belong or one that had left too quickly. Despite the growing clarity, no formal suspect had been named. But privately, Ellison was certain. Whoever did this knew Jamie's routines, knew her vulnerabilities, and exploited a window no wider than half an hour. This wasn't random. And in communities like Seward, that kind of crime, one done in silence, with preparation and efficiency, cuts deeper. Because when someone dies inside their own home, despite asking for help, the question always turns, what else could have been done? In any homicide investigation, patterns of escalation matter. They aren't just red flags, they're warnings that someone didn't read in time. For Jamie Hagan, the signs were documented, filed, time-stamped, and ultimately disregarded until it was too late. When the investigative team at the Seward County Sheriff's Office opened her civil court record, the warnings weren't buried. They were right there. On December 16, 2024, Jamie filed a motion for a protection order in Lancaster County District Court. The petition was signed, notarized, and included a 4-page handwritten statement. She described harassment, emotional intimidation, and an incident at her residence, where the subject allegedly entered her home uninvited and screamed threats in front of her children. According to the affidavit, she wrote, "I believe he will hurt me if he is not kept away." Attached to the filing were 3 screenshots of text messages, 2 photos showing minor damage to her bedroom door, and a log of unsolicited phone calls. 28 in one day. It wasn't speculative. It was evidentiary, and it was granted. The temporary protection order barred the subject from approaching Jamie or her children, their school, or her place of employment. It also revoked access to their shared residence, which Jamie had begun the process of transferring solely to her name after ending the engagement 3 weeks prior. What made this record more troubling was that it wasn't the first interaction the courts had with this individual. A prior case from 2012 involved misdemeanor domestic assault charges in another Nebraska county, later pled down to disorderly conduct. That record never triggered enhanced scrutiny when Jamie filed in 2024. 3 weeks after the order was granted, Jamie contacted law enforcement again. This time, she reported that the subject had driven by her workplace repeatedly between 4 and 6 p.m. Despite the protective order being active, a sheriff's deputy documented the call. A brief report was written. No arrest was made. According to Seward County's own risk assessment criteria for protective order violations, repeat proximity violations, especially involving children, are supposed to prompt mandatory arrest. That didn't happen. No follow-up check was made with Jamie in the following days. The lack of intervention wasn't due to unclear policy. The policies were in place. They were just loosely enforced. In her last call to a friend, 4 days before the murder, Jamie said she felt like nothing was going to be done until it was too late. Investigators examining the timeline began to match emotional triggers with procedural gaps. Jamie had deactivated her home security system 3 weeks before her death. Her friend told officers it was because she felt it didn't matter anymore. She believed she was being watched, that the system had been compromised. Her laptop search history showed visits to self-defense sites, concealed carry laws in Nebraska, and domestic violence counseling services. This was a woman aware of her risk. She took every step the system made available, but the system gave her paperwork, not protection. On January 3, 2025, the man named in Jamie's protection order was arrested for violating the order. The charges stemmed from the December incident. The violation report cited aggressive verbal contact outside her workplace and direct violation of a no-contact clause. He was held in Seward County Jail for 35 days. During that time, Jamie reestablished her children's school pickup routine, resumed regular work hours, and began discussing travel plans with her sister. She'd started to feel safer. Then on February 7, 2025, he was released on bail. A judge signed the release order after accepting a $75,000 cash bond posted by a private surety agent. No GPS monitoring was ordered. No notification was sent to Jamie. Investigators later confirmed she found out about the release through a mutual acquaintance, not the courts. It was at that point between 3 and 4 p.m. on February 7th that she texted her friend, "He's out. No warning, no update, just out." Records show she left work early that day. Security logs from her employer show she badged out at 4:17 p.m., 1 hour ahead of schedule. She picked up groceries, paid a utility bill in person, and arrived home before 6 p.m. No unusual activity was recorded after that, until she was found dead the next morning. This entire section of the investigation focused on risk, known, reported, documented risk. Forensic psychology profiles later presented to the DA's office framed the case not as a crime of passion, but one of fixation and persistence. The subject demonstrated consistent attempts to reinsert himself into Jamie's life, even after legal barriers were put in place. Detective Mara Ellison included in her summary to the district attorney, "This wasn't a breakdown in systems. This was a system performing at minimum thresholds and still failing. The warning signs weren't missed. They were ignored." The question wasn't whether Jamie did enough. The question was whether anyone else did. Cases like Jamie's highlight a critical fracture in how protective orders are issued, enforced, and communicated. In Nebraska, like in many states, enforcement depends heavily on the discretion of individual officers, prosecutors, and judges. Without proactive intervention, like GPS monitoring, mandatory victim notifications, or conditional bail restrictions, these orders amount to passive documentation. As the case built momentum in the media, attention shifted from who did it to why no one stopped it. Jamie had warned friends, family, her employer, and the courts. The evidence wasn't emotional. It was literal. She saw it coming. She just couldn't get anyone to take it seriously in time. By February 12, 2025, the investigation into Jamie Hagan's murder entered a critical phase: ballistic analysis and behavioral sequencing. The goal was clear: match the physical evidence to a pattern that would isolate opportunity, access, and intent. With no murder weapon recovered and no confession, the evidence had to speak for itself. The autopsy had confirmed 4 gunshot wounds, all at close range. 2 to the upper torso, 1 to the neck, 1 to the skull. The entry angles were tight, less than 5 degrees of variance, and all shots were delivered from behind or side angle left. This wasn't chaotic. It was execution style and controlled. The shooter fired from an estimated distance of 3.5 to 4.5 feet. Forensic pathology concluded the victim likely never turned to face her killer. All 4 shell casings recovered at the scene were matched through striation analysis to a .40 caliber semi-automatic. Federal agents at the Omaha field office reviewed the data and confirmed the casings bore distinctive marks consistent with a Glock Model 23 Gen 4. That narrowed the weapon pool significantly. The Glock 23 is a compact, polymer frame handgun frequently used by law enforcement and licensed civilian owners. But notably, this model also accepts a range of aftermarket suppressors. The absence of neighbor reports about hearing gunshots was no longer considered circumstantial. It was tactical. Investigators canvassed local FFL dealers and private sales databases. One relevant sale from 2022 was flagged. A Glock 23 purchased legally by a man whose name would appear again in connection to the suspect, though no formal link had been drawn at that point. The weapon had not been reported stolen, and its registered owner had no criminal history. Still, its location was unknown. The owner claimed he had sold it off in a private trade months ago, with no documentation provided. Back at the scene, forensic technicians completed a secondary luminol sweep of the back entryway. Minimal trace detection confirmed no visible blood trail exited the home, reinforcing the assumption that the shooter cleaned up or never sustained injury during the attack. No drag marks. No blood transfer. The killing occurred where Jamie was found, and it ended there. But a single anomaly did emerge. A partial boot tread near the eastern fence line overlapped with mulch residue identified in Chapter 2. When enhanced, the impression revealed a Vibram sole pattern common to military-grade tactical boots. Not exclusive, but rare enough in civilian settings to warrant attention. Size 11. A cross-reference with the Nebraska State Patrol's boot database returned 200 similar matches within a tri-county radius. Too broad to be actionable, yet worth noting. What mattered more was how the killer moved. Investigators reconstructed the crime in reverse, tracking each step from entry to exit. The shooter likely entered through the back door between 12:38 and 12:42 a.m. Based on the thermostat and phone shutoff sync, the attack occurred between 12:48 and 12:51 a.m. That gave less than 10 minutes for confrontation, 4 gunshots, no sign of physical resistance, and a clean exit. Ellison's team reviewed data overlays from mobile towers. One unassigned device pinged near the residence at 12:41 a.m. using a prepaid burner phone that shut off 22 minutes later. That number had never been active before. The phone was activated at 11:57 p.m. on February 7th, then deactivated permanently at 1:03 a.m. No SMS history, no call records. One signal burst, consistent with location tracking apps or navigation routing, was detected just 12 minutes before Jamie's death. The implication was stark. Whoever came that night had no reason to communicate. They had one purpose. Behavioral analysts brought in by the Nebraska State Homicide Review Task Force reviewed the scene, timing, and method. Their conclusion: the suspect exhibits predatory patience, focused outcome, and low emotional volatility during act. Translation: this wasn't explosive violence. It was purpose-driven, and that narrowed the profile. Access, familiarity, confidence in timing, comfort in layout, no struggle, no forced entry. These weren't just characteristics. They were operational indicators. The timeline so far had revealed where and how. The next task was to confirm who could move through that environment with that level of precision. And why now? Because in murders like this, timing isn't just circumstantial. It's often the motive itself. By the middle of February 2025, investigators turned their attention to Jamie Hagan's final days. Not just her movements, but the subtle decisions she made leading up to February 8th. The data wasn't hidden, it was routine. Phone logs, receipts, login records. But in cases like this, it's the ordinary that reveals the unusual. Jamie's cell service provider provided a detailed usage report from February 1st through the night of her death. Between February 5 and 7, Jamie received 13 calls from unidentified numbers. 6 of them rang out, none were returned. Her call habits had changed too. Historically active during midday hours, she had stopped answering calls altogether after 5 p.m., starting February 6th. Investigators flagged the shift but didn't attribute it to isolation, more likely avoidance. The last confirmed person to speak to Jamie was her coworker, the office manager at her insurance firm. She stated that Jamie left work early on February 7th, appearing distracted and uncomfortable. Surveillance footage from the office parking lot showed her exiting the building at 4:17 p.m., nearly an hour before her normal departure. Jamie then visited a local grocery store, where cameras captured her purchasing 2 bags of groceries, including snacks her daughters preferred. She paid in cash. The transaction was time-stamped at 4:42 p.m. From there, she made one more stop, a utility payment center downtown. She submitted a check in person, rather than online as she usually did. A clerk later recalled she appeared tense, in a hurry, but polite. The timeline shows she was home by 5:35 p.m. Her vehicle didn't move again after that. No calls, no visitors, no doorbell motion detected on surrounding houses. Her home became silent. The absence of motion becomes a kind of evidence when compared against her prior routine. Jamie's laptop, recovered from her kitchen desk, was last accessed at 6:03 p.m. She had been reviewing a school calendar and typing an email to her daughter's teacher, unsent. The email draft ended mid-sentence. That same night at 11:34 p.m., Jamie sent her final text. That message, already logged and analyzed in earlier stages of the case, wasn't just a warning. It was confirmation that she knew something was wrong. What investigators still didn't know was how she learned about the threat. There had been no formal notice issued to her regarding the release of the person named in her protection order. This was confirmed. No automated phone call, no email, no letter. The court record system logged the release at 12:04 p.m. on February 7th. Jamie left work 4 hours later. The likely conclusion is she was notified informally, through someone she knew. That point, while unconfirmed, reshaped how investigators viewed the psychological lead-up. Jamie had stopped responding, but she hadn't stopped preparing. Her home was clean. Her daughters were already scheduled to stay at their grandparents'. She had paid bills, finished groceries, wrote a teacher. She wasn't in panic. She was in containment mode. A forensic social worker assisting the DA's office later remarked, "When victims go quiet after a surge of reporting, it's usually not because they feel safe. It's because they've calculated their options and know what won't work." Jamie didn't escalate her concerns in the final 24 hours. She didn't go to the police again. She didn't activate her security system. But she did reach out quietly. The systems that were designed to notify her didn't engage. The person she feared walked free, and when he came to her door, the only defense left was time, and she didn't have enough of it. By February 19th, 2025, Jamie Hagan's murder had moved beyond a local investigation. The facts of the case, lethal violence just hours after a known threat was released from custody, began circulating on regional news broadcasts and advocacy platforms across Nebraska. Her story didn't trend nationally, but in small towns like Seward, it didn't need to. Everyone already knew. The sheriff's office, under rising scrutiny, initiated an internal administrative review. Not a criminal inquiry, just a process audit. The focus was narrow. Was protocol followed regarding Jamie's protection order, custody notifications, and the bond release of the individual named in her December 2024 complaint? The answer, technically, was yes. But as investigators quickly learned, technical compliance doesn't mean functional protection. The release order for the suspect was signed at 12:04 p.m. on February 7th. Nebraska state law did not require victim notification unless the accused had been placed under Department of Corrections supervision, which in this case he had not. He was in county custody, released via private bond. There was no GPS monitoring attached, no alert system, no judge's override, no mechanism in place to ensure Jamie was told. That oversight, legal but devastating, was the foundation of the administrative review. What followed was a reconstruction of every point at which information could have moved but didn't. Emails between Seward County court clerks and the district attorney's office confirmed that Jamie's protective order was still active at the time of her death. However, that status did not automatically trigger any direct notification upon her abuser's release. A voicemail-only system had existed in the past, but it was outdated and inconsistently maintained. Jamie had not opted into the state's victim alert registry, not because she refused, but because it had never been presented as a clear option. Records showed she had not been assigned a case advocate or court liaison. She was representing herself. Legally, that was permissible. Practically, it was fatal. A report from the Nebraska Commission on Domestic Violence, dated just 6 months prior, had identified these same gaps. Understaffed, underfunded, fragmented communications between law enforcement, judicial officers, and community-based support agencies were listed as known vulnerabilities. In Jamie's case, those vulnerabilities collapsed into a single point of failure. Investigators then examined what happened after the murder, how quickly information moved, and how clearly. The answer, less than ideal. Public statements from the sheriff's office didn't acknowledge prior reports until pressed by local journalists. Press releases initially avoided mentioning the protective order, instead framing the case as a targeted domestic homicide. The public grew uneasy, not at the idea that a murder had happened, but that everything leading to it had happened by the book and still ended this way. The Nebraska Domestic Violence Coordinating Council, NDVCC, published a case bulletin by February 21st. It broke the chain down clearly. Prior reports, filed, protection order, granted, violations, reported, arrest, made, release, legal, notification, none. The report didn't dramatize, it simply showed what was missing between each line. The problem wasn't that the system malfunctioned, it was that it was working exactly as it was designed to, and it wasn't enough. At Jamie's memorial, held 3 days after the report's publication, friends and family gathered not just to remember her, but to demand policy review. Her sister read aloud part of Jamie's court affidavit from December, including the sentence, "I do not want to die waiting for someone to believe I'm not exaggerating." The words weren't new, but this time they were finally heard. By late February 2025, the case against the prime suspect in Jamie Hagan's murder shifted from investigative phase to prosecutorial preparation. This chapter wasn't about speculation. It was about confirmation, data points aligning across physical, digital, and behavioral evidence that allowed the Seward County District Attorney's Office to file a formal first-degree murder charge. The linchpin was the burner phone recovered through tower dump analysis. As covered earlier, this device pinged briefly between 12:41 and 1:03 a.m. on February 8th, consistent with the window of Jamie's homicide. While the phone itself was never recovered, triangulation from 3 separate towers placed it within 100 meters of Jamie's residence for 22 minutes. That alone did not prove ownership, but the purchase of the phone, traced through a convenience store security system, did. Surveillance footage from a gas station 30 minutes outside Seward, captured 2 days before the murder, showed a male subject entering the store, purchasing a prepaid phone in cash. The timestamp was 7:12 p.m. on February 6th. Investigators matched the vehicle parked outside to a registered 2012 gray Dodge Ram belonging to the man named in Jamie's protection order. This created a full chain: purchase, activation, tower pings, deactivation post-crime. When paired with the ballistic findings from Chapter 4, Glock 23 match and suppressor-compatible round casings, the circumstantial frame gained material support. The suspect's prior access to a firearm of the same caliber, verified through a 2022 private trade, added weight. He claimed the gun had changed hands informally. No documentation, no witness. Beyond the physical, the DA's office received a forensic behavior report from the state's threat assessment unit. It listed patterns in the suspect's known behavior post-breakup: stalking, unsolicited contact, public confrontation, and escalation following legal intervention. 2 prior partners were interviewed. One confirmed prior threats involving firearms. Another referenced controlling behavior and tracking her movements, though no police report was ever filed. What pushed the case across the threshold, however, was geofencing. A court-ordered warrant obtained for a 1-hour window between 12:30 and 1:30 a.m. on February 8th yielded only 5 device IDs near the crime scene. 4 were immediately cleared, registered to neighbors, 1 passerby delivery vehicle. The 5th was anonymized but linked to the same burner phone discussed above. It had never connected to a Wi-Fi network or app store. Classic signature of a single-use device. The prosecution didn't need a confession. They had alignment, motive, opportunity, digital trace, ballistic match, and documented threat history. On February 26, 2025, the DA filed charges for first-degree murder, unlawful use of a weapon, violation of a protection order, and aggravated stalking. The arrest warrant was executed the same day. The suspect, hospitalized since February 8th for a failed suicide attempt, was placed under law enforcement custody and transferred to a secured state correctional medical facility. Public announcement of the charges was made through a short press release. No press conference, no televised remarks, just facts, exactly as the community and the family had been demanding for weeks. Behind the scenes, the process wasn't without resistance. The defense counsel immediately filed notice of intent to pursue a diminished capacity claim. A second psychiatric evaluation was requested. Prosecutors responded with urgency. No delays. The judge granted a 30-day window for medical observation, but denied bail. By the time charges were confirmed, the public momentum surrounding Jamie's case had translated into tangible policy discussion. Two Nebraska state legislators introduced a bill requiring mandatory victim notification for all bond releases related to active protective orders, regardless of court tier. The weight of evidence in Jamie Hagan's case didn't rest on one dramatic clue. It was the layering of details, camera footage, phone metadata, shell casing marks, behavioral timelines that delivered the clearest narrative law enforcement could construct. And it told a story of premeditation and follow-through. As of May 27, 2025, the state of Nebraska versus Casey Kent remains in pretrial status. The defendant, charged with first-degree murder in the killing of Jamie Hagan, is being held without bail at a state correctional medical facility following a failed suicide attempt on the night of the crime. The court granted a second order for psychiatric evaluation in late March to assess Kent's competency to stand trial. The evaluation is ongoing. No trial date has been set. The prosecution has maintained its position. The district attorney's office confirmed it would oppose any diminished capacity defense, citing the suspect's calculated behavior, use of a burner phone, prior violations of the protective order, and absence of mental health crises documented during the months preceding the homicide. The case has been designated high priority, but prosecutors have acknowledged that, under state procedural rules, delays tied to mental competency evaluations are not uncommon and rarely expedited. In the meantime, the aftermath has moved beyond the courtroom. Seward County commissioners, responding to increasing public pressure, held two public safety hearings in March focused on protective order enforcement and bail-related victim notifications. Several panelists, including survivors of domestic violence, victim advocates, and legal professionals, referenced Jamie Hagan's case directly. Her name appeared not only in court filings, but also in draft legislative language. Two bills have been introduced to the Nebraska legislature. The first proposes automatic GPS monitoring for any individual released on bond while under a protection order. The second would create a centralized, mandatory victim notification system across all 93 counties, regardless of custody tier or supervising agency. As of this writing, both proposals remain under committee review. Outside of legislative channels, Jamie's case has prompted tangible change within Nebraska's domestic violence prevention community. The Nebraska Domestic Violence Coordinating Council has begun using her case as a real-time training model for court clerks, victim advocates, and law enforcement liaisons. A new digital flowchart titled Gaps That Kill walks professionals through missed notification points using Jamie's timeline. This is not public spectacle. There are no viral hashtags or trending headlines. But in places like Seward, meaningful reform rarely begins with noise. It begins with a name that people refuse to forget. Jamie Hagan did not die because she stayed silent. She died despite speaking up, despite following every step the system provided. That fact, more than any charge or sentence, is what reshaped the local conversation. Her family has not spoken publicly since the charging announcement in February, but her sister submitted a written statement to the NDVCC that was later read aloud during a training session. Jamie did not want to be remembered for how she died, but she knew if something happened, it would matter more what came after. That after is still happening. In Nebraska, first-degree murder carries a mandatory life sentence if convicted. But as of now, no verdict exists. Casey Kent remains in custody. The courts have not yet ruled on his competency. There is no closure, only a process still in motion. But there is clarity. Not every case ends with a trial. Some end with a mirror held up to the law, asking whether the protections we trust are built to do anything more than react. Jamie Hagan's case does not live in the realm of uncertainty. The evidence is intact. The charges are filed. What remains is whether justice, delayed though it is, will mean something more than legal procedure. In the end, justice is more than a courtroom verdict. It's about the systems we choose to build and the lives we choose to protect before it's too late. If you're watching this and wondering what could have been done differently, maybe the better question is, what are we still not doing now? As someone who's walked through the aftermath, I can tell you, listen when someone says they're scared. Believe them the first time. And if you're ever the one needing help, don't wait for permission to protect yourself. If this story moved you, leave a comment. Let me know where you're watching from or what you would change in your own community. And hey, if this video meant something to you, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next case. Let's keep these stories alive, together.